It is indeed, I know I'm a new face to many of you. It is indeed my privilege to anchor the 4th speech analysis workshop today on evaluation contests. I feel out of the 4 or 5 categories of contests that are held every year in Toastmasters, an evaluation contest is the most difficult one, both to participate in and judge. Firstly, I find it very difficult to find areas of improvement, even in myself, let alone in others. So I'm sure all of us could do with some help in evaluations. And today we are really lucky to have a stalwart trainer to help us ace in evaluation contests. Before I invite her to speak, let me introduce to you 2 important role players who will help us conduct this session smoothly. Our Zoom moderator for today will be Distinguished Toastmaster Rohan Ravindra, current District 121 Public Relations Manager and one of the youngest DTMs in town. So in case any of you face a technical glitch, feel free to ping the Zoom moderator, Distinguished Toastmaster Rohan. We also have Distinguished Toastmaster Gokul P. Menon, District 121 Administration Manager as a backup, in case you can't find DTM Rohan in the participants list. Our timer for today will be Toastmaster Bhavani Hemant, current Area Director, Area C2, and Secretary of Macon Communications Club. So I request all the speakers today to please spin the timer. Toastmaster Bhavani H. Before we start off with the training, a quick reminder. We will have a question and answer session at the end, so you're welcome to post questions in the Zoom chat window. You may address your questions to everyone, and the questions will be raised to the trainer for answers during the QA session. So now, without further ado, let me introduce our esteemed trainer for today. She has a doctorate in English literature and is currently principal of Swastika National School affiliated to the Mangalore University. She's also a guest faculty at St. Agnes Center for PG Studies and Research. Member of many professional organizations. Awardee in many prestigious awards, including the Women of Substance Award by Rotary International. An author of many publications and paper presentations. She's also a trainer for Bosch in skill development programs for the youth of India. She has also been a resource person, anchor, and facilitator for many conferences, webinars, and cultural shows. Indeed, it is an honor to invite such an esteemed person to share her insights on how to excel in evaluation contests. So let us all put our hands together to welcome Distinguished Toastmaster Malini Hebbar. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Susan. Toastmasters, I feel like saying Hari Hari Narayanan this evening, because after taking more than 20 training sessions last year at club, area, division, and district levels, this year it was as though I had gone out of circulation, like our Prime Minister's demonetized note. And suddenly there was Distinguished Toastmaster Narayanan asking me to take this session and bringing me back into circulation. So I remain indebted to him. But I must also admit that our one of the trios, I must say, Arjun, had asked me to take a session, but then it was on pathways. And let me confess that though my 4th DTM is on pathways, I still get lost in the wilderness of the paths of pathways. So I declined the offer. But when it comes to evaluation, if you can consider my experience in Toastmasters from 1996 till date, I think I can say that I have the worth of my salt to take a session on evaluation. But before I start the session, I must address our omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent District Director Vanitha Rangarajan Well, I don't know whether I must address you as mother of all, as Mahashweta Devi does in one of her books. We have our scintillating trio, equally scintillating past district director, Nagarajan. But I'm not going to mention all other names because when Vanitha went through the list, I was reminded of our ritual. When the husband performs the ritual, the wife sits touching her husband so that all the punya that husband gets also comes on to her. So just as Vanitha addressed everybody, virtually, I touched Vanitha and I sat here, as Narayanan said, virtually, because right now, none of you would be like to be touched by me. As Narayanan said, this is COVID special. This is my last day of quarantine. So I don't think anybody would care to be touched by me. But then virtually, I said ditto, 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 as Vanitha went through the list of all the distinguished Toastmasters that we have here. Thank you very much for being here. And I must say, Kushi, when I listened to you right at the beginning, I had this Kannada sentence, Tumba Kushi Aitu, Kushiddu, Matu Keli, voice Keli. And then came Susan, who introduced me with so much elan. Susan, if at all, Toastmasters who have gathered here today, this evening, have to give you an evaluation, as you said, they would find it difficult to point out areas of improvement when it comes to your introduction, because it is an art in itself to pick out, to cull out what is important to say about the resource person. So thank you very much for that. Bhavani, thank you for the care that you have taken in contacting me and asking me as to when I want the flags and all that. And I promise all Toastmasters who have gathered here that I will keep to the time frame. I've been given 45 minutes and I will surely not take more than that. And usually we say that we would like to make it interactive and all that. But then on Zoom platform, it becomes a little difficult when I share my screen to make it interactive. A lot of time gets wasted. So maybe I would make my presentation and then wait for your questions. And as your moderator said, if you have questions, you can also raise your questions on the chat box. So without further ado, I would like to share my screen and start my presentation. As Vanitha always says, the most oft-asked question is whether I'm heard and seen. Now my question is whether my screen is shared and whether you can see my screen. Vanitha is giving me a thumbs up. All right. Now, I was given the topic, evaluate to motivate, but then I changed it and I thought I would put it as evaluate to win, because it is the contest season. And I know that not all of you have gathered here because you want to contest, but then those of you who have gathered here because you want to contest and perhaps learn something from this session, I must say that there is no harm in saying that we want to evaluate to win. I always believe in the idea that whether we win or not, we must compete in such a manner that we want to win. We show the spirit that we want to win. So I would definitely take this session as not evaluate to motivate, because that I would do probably in a session for a club when I think of my own members and how they should motivate the speaker. But today, when I talk about evaluation, I have the contest in mind. Now, when you look at that saw, the picture of the saw, you may wonder whether isolation in COVID has made me murderous. No, it hasn't. I know that SAW is the acronym for Speech Analysis Workshop. But then I also felt that it was a very good lesson in, I must say, in productivity, because we always say that sharpen the saw. So it's the best lesson that one can think of when it comes to productivity. So it is Lincoln himself who said, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. And that is what all of us need to do. And probably at the end of my session, you may feel that your saw is as blunt as it was at the beginning of the session, but then there is no harm in giving it a try, is there? And there is also no harm in keeping aside, say, 1 hour or 1.5 hours of your schedule for this particular session. So let's see what needs to be done. Now, let me first of all say that what I place before you today will be entirely from my experience as an evaluator, my experience as the target of an evaluation, my experience as a Toastmaster. So it's all, some annotation is going on. So if the host could disable annotation, I would be happy. So that I don't need extra designs on my presentation. I think I have made it graphic enough. I have made it picturesque enough. So I don't need extra annotations at all. Yes, thank you very much. So let me say that all that I place before you will be from my experience, okay, as your Toastmaster. So the first question that I would like to raise and also try and answer is the question of preparation. Now, you see, why would such workshops be held unless you believe in the idea of preparing yourself for the contest? So preparation is a must. But immediately after that, the question that arises is, to what extent do you prepare yourself? So the crux of the matter lies in the balance that we can achieve in preparation and spontaneity. So my focus this evening would be on achieving that balance. Yes, you are prepared, but at the same time, you are spontaneous, or you at least give the appearance of being spontaneous. So let's see whether we can do it in any way. Now, when it comes to preparation, my first lesson for you is about the Johari window, a concept very close to my heart, which I share with my audience in almost all training sessions. So all of you would probably know what Johari window is. So my question is whether you have internalized the concept and whether you have implemented the concept. Because you see, Johari is a portmanteau name coming from Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham. So these two American psychologists came up with this idea of Johari window. It is self-explanatory. That is why even the learning that you get from Johari window is heuristic. So it is purely self-explanatory and it is purely for self-development. But very quickly, if you take a look at the 4 parts of the window, you will get an understanding of the 4 parts that each of us has in the psyche. So we have this open self, known to others. I've been introduced to all of you. So even if some of you hadn't known till you logged in this evening that a person like Malini Hebbar existed on this earth, you now know who I am and what I do. So that's the open self. You also have the hidden self. Not everything from my life is an open book for you to read. I won't give you that pleasure or the pain. So I will have my own share of hidden self. There is this unknown self, which we live and probably will never come to know about it until we die, unless something drastic happens in our life. So this evening, my focus is on what is called blind self. And when it comes to the blind self, you clearly have that known to others, not known to self. So if we have to improve ourselves, no matter what the area is, it could be evaluation, it could be table topics, it could be prepared speech, no matter what area it is, if we have to improve ourselves, we have to take cognizance of this blind self. Now, I think COVID has made all of us tech savvy and all of us know about Google Form, etc., etc. So before the contest, those of you who intend to participate in the contest, do take evaluation sessions in your club and do distribute Google Forms and give the Google Form specially to the speaker whom you have evaluated, because that speaker, and if one of the evaluation forms has more suggestions and inputs, rest assured that that evaluation form, Google form, is from your speaker, because your speaker would definitely have many things to put forth about your evaluation, which he and she wouldn't do if you were to ask that person directly. So anonymous appraisal, anonymous evaluation of how you have been as an evaluator would definitely help. Now, I strongly believe in this because you see, there is a lot of gap between what we call the signifier and the signified. Now, we mean to say something, but when we actually say that, does it come out as we meant it to be? Now, let me give you two examples that I remember. In one of our club meetings, an evaluator evaluated a speaker and came up with this particular sentence. She said, "Your voice was very soothing." Nothing wrong in that. Nothing wrong in considering somebody's voice to be soothing. So she said, "Your voice was very soothing." But the next sentence was, "It was so soothing that it could put anyone to sleep." Now, I don't think any speaker would be happy to be told that his or her voice was so soothing that the audience could sleep with the impact of the voice. Now, there was one more occasion when a speaker referred to a regal presenter, an evaluator referred to a regal speaker, and he said, "You were very regal on stage." No harm. Okay, regal. The next sentence was, "All of us felt like Lilliputians." Now, you see, if you say somebody is regal, yes, I'll be happy. I'm sure that when Vanita was compared to Shivagami, she was very happy to be compared with Shivagami, the regal one. But then if we say that everybody else has been daunted by this one's person, or stunted, dwarfed by the presence of this person, that's not going to leave the person with a good taste in the mouth. So you see, we have to be clear in this particular area of what we mean to say and whether what we meant to say came out as we meant it to be. But how will we know that? Unless somebody corrects us. If you ask me whether I gave this particular evaluation to those two evaluators, no, I've never done that. I've never gone back to those evaluators to tell them that it was not right on their part, because it's always it's a sensitive issue. That is why, as Narayanan said, evaluation is a dangerous plane. And if at all we have to know what is it that we have achieved, we need to have that evaluation of our evaluation. Now, the second point is whether an evaluation can be like a speech. I strongly cater to the notion of saying that, yes, it ought to be like a speech, and it ought to bring in all elements of a good speech. Now, Mehrabian has given us, Albert Mehrabian, an Armenian, has given this particular impact of 3 V's, very often misinterpreted. He doesn't mean to say that words can be nonsense. When he says that the verbal impact is only 7%, he doesn't mean to say that. Your text is there, but he's talking about the impact of the text by talking about 3 V's. I'm not getting into that because that's not my focal area right now. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that, yes, for me, an evaluation should be like a speech, taking into consideration the pattern of a speech and the impact of a speech and the impact of 3 V's that we would have: verbal, vocal, and visual in a speech. Now, this I say because in a speech, we always talk about the primacy effect and recency effect. Of course, this again is debatable. There are a few researchers who debunk this whole idea of primacy and recency effect, and they say there is nothing of that kind. But most of the researchers do agree with the point that there is something called primacy effect and there is something called recency effect. So when we talk about primacy effect, it is, of course, what we say right at the beginning. And when we talk about recency, it is something that we say just before we close. Now, of course, in terms of evaluation, primacy effect would be all the positives that we give to the speaker. And when it comes to recency effect, it would be suggestions for improvement. So can we be prepared to some extent when it comes to these things? Again, is a question that I'm going to deal with. I know that When it comes to preparation, many have different templates that they keep ready, and they just have evaluation as fill in the blanks. Now, no comments. It's your method. Some also are almost scientific in their approach to evaluation. So they have different tools, and take it from me, I have seen many folding the sheet in various manners. It's as though they have a contest for origami, where they write 1 point here, 1 point there, 1 point here, and they keep their sheet. And then, of course, they give it when they have to go for their, after the time is up, they have to submit it. But I've seen different people use different approaches. Now, if you ask me what my approach has been, I feel primarily we should be concerned about two things. So my sheet usually has only two parts to it. One is things that I considered impressive in the speaker, and things which I considered desirous of improvement. So I just have two sections there. And let me also tell you that going by the idea that an evaluation is for 2 to 3 minutes, 2.5, 3 minutes, I have also seen from my experience that if we have 3 points in these two categories, it is enough for our 2 to 3 minutes evaluation. However, I don't mean to say that the minute you get 3 points, you must put the cap of your pen and sit tight. Do jot down all the points that come to your mind, and afterwards you can prioritize the points and see which of the points you consider to be more important than the rest, just as we do brainstorming when it comes to essay writing. Now, this is just a personal sharing that I have with you as to how I go about it. But if you have a method which is foolproof and which you feel is better than mine, you have to use that. You are most welcome to use it. Now, the next point of preparation. Now, it's not because I'm a professor of retired associate professor of English, but I do feel that analogies, similes, and metaphors can have a lot of impact. Now, why do they have a lot of impact? They have a lot of impact because they act as a bridge between idea 1 and idea 2. And if there is a gap in knowledge, that gap in knowledge is bridged by the similes, metaphors, and analogies that we provide, that we use in our evaluation, which will remain in the mind of the audience and especially in the mind of the judges. But then let me agree that it is easier said than done. So let me share with you some of the analogies that I have heard being used. Now, I have had any number of people comparing a speech to chocolate, some to milk chocolate, some to dark chocolate, some to mint chocolate. I have had evaluators talking about the speech as masala dosa and saying that for the first glance, I thought it was a plain dosa, but later on, when I looked at the different layers of your speech, it turned out to be masala dosa. I have heard evaluators who talk about different varieties of mangoes. Now, I have no quarrels with these things, except to say that now in one particular contest, when the evaluators used the analogy of the chocolate, the same analogy was used by 3 evaluators. So where is the question of your originality? You will, even if your evaluation is good, you will lose out simply because it's your misfortune that somebody else also used the same analogy. Now, when it comes to masala dosa, 50% of the audience might say, wow, what an analogy of masala dosa. But 50% of the audience might take it as not very profound. Now, when it comes to different varieties of mangoes, of saying totapuri, kalapadi, and all that, that regional flavor again might not have a universal appeal. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that analogies are necessary, but when we use these analogies, similes, and metaphors, can we be more or less sure? We can never be 100% sure of anything in life. But can we be more or less sure of these analogies being appealing to all? Now, I have an idea with you, which I would like to share with you. Now, you see, when it comes to taglines of famous products and companies, you must admit to the fact that these are the tested taglines and slogans, and it would have gone through the hands of so many specialists, and it would have been given to the audience, etc., etc. So these taglines have been tested, have been taken as appealing to the imagination of the listeners or the viewers. So what I feel is that you can Google and look at some of these impactful taglines and keep a few of these taglines ready, and you can acknowledge the source, but also use it as an analogy. Now, for example, now if you take the tagline of BMW, the ultimate driving machine, now probably this tagline lends itself to multiple interpretations. So you can say, just as BMW is the ultimate driving machine, you prove to be the ultimate speaking machine. And then it doesn't come to an end there. You can also move on to, now when it comes to suggestions for improvement, such an analogy lends itself to be built up, to grow beyond the obvious. So maybe you can even say, is there something that should serve as the lubricant, whether the machine needs some kind of servicing? So that's how, you can move on to your suggestions of improvement. Keeping to the analogy, you can continue and you can make your analogy original. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, analogies do work wonders. Similes and metaphors do work wonders, but see that they are not cliched ones. They're not, what we have used and overused and what you would have heard somewhere and jotted down and then decided to use it, because you don't know how many among the audience would have already listened to the same analogy. So any one of this is a miscellaneous one. I don't mean to say you should take any one of these, but this is only by way of an example, because you see, if you say good to the last drop, you could say that your speech was good to the last word. So if you want to make some positive statements, which will become impactful because you are using already existing lines. So to that extent, yes, be prepared. Now, one of my favorite areas is to talk about the power of three. Again, here, I don't mean to say that any one of these psychological aspects of learning can be put forth with 100% certainty. But this has been tested and used by many. That is why there is no harm at all in using this. Now, when I say the power of three, I'm talking about the word power. Now, you see, this power of three could be in rhyming words. It could be in alliterative words. And even if you can't think of rhyming words, alliterative words, the very fact that you put three words together will again give you the edge over others when it comes to the area of power of three. For example, if you were to say, you could induce, produce, and also amuse, and then you have to move on to explain as to what you meant by saying induce, produce, and amuse. So you could probably say you could induce the audience to act with the power of your words, and you produce the desired effect in your speech as far as the message was concerned. But while doing this, you also succeeded to amuse your audience because you had a subtle sense of humor. So you are using the power of three, or as I said, alliterative. You were clear, concise, and convincing. And even if it is not alliterative, just three words put together, you were clear, humorous, and witty. They're not rhyming, they're not alliterative, they are three separate words, but brought together simply because the power of three works. If the power of three wasn't to work, I don't think so many people would have used it over our history. Now, there are also a few lines which can make your evaluation a little light-hearted. Now, this again is not from me. Now, I have tweaked some of the catchy phrases that I got as advertisements for gyms, and I tweaked it a little bit to suit evaluation. For example, supposing somebody, a speaker, overshot the time, and you want to talk about the speaker overshooting the time, instead of making it a very serious suggestion for improvement, if you make it lighthearted, because always you see, when it comes to suggestions, if you try to make it lighthearted, nothing like it. So if you say in the hustle and bustle of using your muscle, that is because of the gestures that a speaker is likely to have, you seem to have a tussle with time. It sounds lighthearted, and the speaker is also not going to be offended and will have a smile. And our ultimate aim is to make the speaker feel comfortable. And in the contest also, if the evaluator can make the demo speaker feel comfortable, the judges will take note of this. Now, if a speaker has not used the time at her or his disposal, you could make one more similar statement, lighthearted. You are too fit to quit, meaning to say, even when you had time to speak, you did not make use of your time. Now, in evaluation, for me, the most important aspect is the time of transition. After speaking about the positives, when you move on to suggestions for improvement, how do you do that? Now, this, I feel, if I were to judge, I would have a special focus on how the evaluator has had a smooth transition from one to the other. Now, again, I have heard many evaluators do it in many ways. One of the most oft-used phrases is to say that if I were to give you a few suggestions to take the speech to the next level. Of course, first time when I heard that, I also sat up and I thought, okay, such a nice transition. But now too many people have already used it, taking the speech to the next level. So you have to be always conscious of what has been used. So even online, when you listen to evaluators, if you feel that something has been used over and over again, a platitude, avoid it. It's not going to work on the imagination of the audience. But then I do admit that when I say, think of an original transition, it's a tall order to give. So if we say, think of an original transition, it's not easy. Again, I say, we have now Google at our disposal, and you can take an ordinarily used phrase and tweak it a little bit and make it extraordinary. Okay. Now, a coin having two sides to it is a very ordinarily used analogy, and it's ordinarily used transition. So it's going to be boring if I use it. But can I tweak it a little bit and I say, numismatics is yet to find a coin with only one side to it. So it will sound slightly different from just talking about every coin having two sides to it. Okay. Now, in the same manner, every slice having two sides to it. So no slice, however thin, can have only one side to it. You're tweaking something that has already been used over and over again, but you are using it differently. To that extent, you are being original. You are being innovative. Now, the third one is my favorite. And that was the one that I used when I won the evaluation contest at Kochi. And it favored me to say that, because on the backdrop, we had tuskers of Kerala on the backdrop. So it suited me to talk about the ivory, and it suited me to talk about no ivory being without a crack. So I could thereon move on to suggestions for improvement. So likewise, if you can use your imagination and keep some transitional phrases ready, that would be of great help in your evaluation. I have given you a few more examples that I thought of. It might or might not appeal to your imagination. So I'm not asking you to use this. All the point that I'm trying to make right here is that keep a transitional sentence, a transitional part ready in your speech. Now, one more point about suggestions for improvement is that this I have experienced quite often, that quite a few evaluators tend to take this particular method. You were very good when it came to body language, but, and there is one suggestion for improvement. Your vocal variety was fabulous, but one more suggestion for improvement. Now, never mix up your positives with your negatives. Have a clear-cut category of positives, and then after you have dealt with the positives, for sure, you move on to the area of improvement. Otherwise, your speaker and your audience and your judges will be confused as to whether you're giving suggestions for improvement, whether you're giving constructive criticism, or what is it. Your audience will not be in a position to decipher. So don't mix up and make your evaluation hazy. Now, just as I said that there are words which can be used, there are also words and sentences which should not be used. And for this, we must develop in us what we call the you attitude. If you were at the receiving end of such a suggestion, would you be happy to get that suggestion? If you wouldn't be happy, is there any way of improving upon this suggestion? I know that quite a few speakers mumble, and then we are not clear about what they have said. And we have every right to bring up this point in our evaluation. But if we say, you were fast and I could not understand what you said, it's not going to be a healthy, constructive criticism. Whereas if you take the onus on yourself, I found it difficult to match your pace of speaking, then you are taking the onus on yourself of saying that you had a problem. It's not that the speaker had a problem, but you had a problem. So always take the onus, the responsibility of not being able to understand something on yourself, so that the speaker is not a target of your cutting, incisive, and sometimes polemic evaluation. Now, I have given you the last two sentences. Dheeraj, you and I won the game. Dheeraj, you and I lost the game. And I would take the first one as grammatically right and the second one as grammatically wrong. And I will come to that later in the question answer session as to why I take these two sentences and what is it that I'm trying to say in these two sentences. And you can keep your answers ready as to why. In fact, Dheeraj, you and I won the game. I repeat myself, could be taken as the right one. But when I say Dheeraj, you and I lost the game, probably it needs improvement. So when I come to the discussion part, I will take this up. So please try and remember what I have given here. Now I come to the concluding part of your evaluation. Now, this is once again the oft-used phrase, all in all, a good speech. What is that all in all? Now, all in all is too much of a generalization. So I feel that as evaluators, instead of saying all in all, we must be more specific in our conclusion, and we must qualify that all in all instead of saying all in all, a good speech. And also, when we say a good speech, but it could have been better, that's not going to be a good conclusion at all, because your last one, I'm not talking about your sandwich method and all that. By now, I think you have been loaded with sandwich. You would have started disliking sandwiches. You know, you might not want sandwiches anymore, because every time we talk about the sandwich method and all that, you know that, and I know it, what we mean by sandwich method. But my point is that when it comes to the conclusion again. Just as I said, transition is very important. Conclusion is important, and the words can be carefully chosen. Now, again, we tend to use superlatives. It was an awesome speech. Now, overall, if it had been an awesome speech, sometimes we even say super awesome. So if it had been awesome or super awesome, how did you ever have the area for suggestions for improvement? So we should, as evaluators, avoid using superlatives, because if we believe in the idea that there is always scope for an improvement, we must avoid superlatives. And let me tell you that if we take a little trouble and sit with the thesaurus will give us a number of words and phrases to use in conclusion. Instead of just saying awesome, we have other better words to use. And all that you need to do is to sit with your thesaurus and think of words and phrases which you would like to use for your concluding part. Now I come to one point. Now, this is a point that is appealing to me. Je ne sais quoi. Je ne sais quoi refers to something that you are not able to conclusively point out and say as the strength of the speaker, or the strength of the person, or the charm of the person, the attraction of the person. But there is something in each one of us which comes out as our je ne sais quoi. Now, my question is, what will be your je ne sais quoi? It's important that we try to have our evaluation with this je ne sais quoi, because as Noah Zanden says, the co-founder and CEO of Quantified Communications, he says, in addition to Mehrabian's 3 V's, there is the 4th V. According to Zanden, that 4th V is vitals, authentic speaking, vitals. He refers to it as authentic speaking, vitals. So that's the 4th V that he refers to. And he says, if you have that authenticity in your presentation, you are going to have a greater impact. Now the question is, how is it that we can bring in what I call je ne sais quoi, what we call the vital authenticity into our evaluation? Now, I will share with you how I try to achieve my je ne sais quoi. I try to achieve my je ne sais quoi by following this Roman idea of tabula rasa. Now, Romans came up with this concept of tabula rasa, the mind being totally empty, without any pre-ideas imprinted upon the mind. It's like an empty blank slate. So, after having spoken about the various ways in which we can keep ourselves prepared for the evaluation, let me also tell you that when we sit there for that 7 minutes or 7.30 minutes, let's see that we go and sit there as evaluators with our mind as the empty slate. I don't mean to say without any ideas, but a slate on which we will imprint ideas, a slate that will take ideas only by listening to the speakers, wherein we don't trouble our mind with any of the preparations that we might have kept ready. That will come into picture when you go to the privacy of your room where you are taken as evaluators for your preparation. Your earlier preparation can come into picture and you can see what can be used where. But when you sit and listen to the speaker deserves your undivided attention. That is, first of all, that goes without saying. And secondly, you have to give yourself the chance of responding to the speech without having any premeditated ideas in your mind. That is why you must keep your mind as an empty slate, tabula rasa, and listen to the speaker and allow your mind to take in impressions, and only then couple complement these impressions with what you would have probably kept ready earlier. Now, this is what you all know, the technique, but I feel that recommendations, although you have 40 marks for analytical quality, I feel that when it comes to recommendations, that is going to be the turning point. Your judges will definitely sit up and listen to your recommendations, and they will see that you have the ability to gauge a speaker and to try and give recommendations if you are a good evaluator. So keep that in mind. And finally, I say that you should be in a position to say whether it is for your prepared speech or your evaluation or any other contest. The district has come up with this particular program of SAW. So all those who plan to contest or all those who plan to take up any of these at the club level, if not for the contest, you should be in a position probably to say, I came for SAW, I conquered. At least if not one facilitator, one trainer, the rest of the trainers at least would definitely have come to your aid, and you would have gathered one or the other information from one or the other trainer. And growth mindset is to say the best is yet to come. That is why I think we must give ourselves the chance to take ideas from others, internalize them, and apply them to our own exercise, whichever the exercise might be. Now, I said it at the beginning, Narayanan said at the beginning, I repeat myself, of all the contests, the most dangerous contest, now Narayanan referred to some members leaving the club because of the harsh evaluation given to them. But let me tell you that evaluation, even when it is a balanced evaluation, runs the risk of earning you enemies. So you might be not a very popular figure if you come up even with an authentic evaluation. That is why I said, even when the evaluation is authentic and you do want to give certain points that you strongly believe in, see whether those points can be given in a light-hearted manner so that the points don't turn out to be too touchy, too sensitive in making people feel ruffled, get ruffled. Okay, so thank you very much. Only the green flag has gone up. I still have my amber and red to go up for my presentation itself. But I always feel that the audience would be happier to come up with their observations. I won't say questions, I would say observations. And I would also say that there are many experienced Toastmasters here, winners, champions of evaluations here. We have district leaders here. We have Toastmasters who have acted as judges here. So when a question is posed, it's not necessary that only I take the question. Whoever feels like adding on, because we are all here on a common platform of learning and growing. So whoever has a good point to make is welcome to make that good point. And let me say that one point to be remembered is the Ethiopian proverb, which says that never open your mouth unless you are sure that you can improve upon the silence. So I think that if we are genuinely convinced with the idea that we have something to contribute, let me welcome all those experienced, seasoned Toastmasters to contribute. Thank you very much. Back to the moderator.
Thank you, distinguished Toastmaster Malini. Indeed, that was an enlightening session, I must say. I have attended quite a few workshops on evaluation, and I must admit that this was one of the most technical presentations on evaluation that I have attended so far, with so many takeaways. And I'm sure more than 150 plus participants will be waiting to ask questions. Can we start off with the QA session, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
So
surely.
I have one question from Toastmaster Swarnalata Yelluri. She says, sometimes we find the speakers are so flawless. What do we do in these situations? And how much does using quotes help us?
Yes. Swarnalata, the first is an off-asked question as to what if the speaker is flawless? What if the speaker is so, to use the favorite words of the young, awesome, okay, that you can't think of anything to say by way of improvement. First of all, let me say, Swarnalata, that if you are an active listener, okay, if you are an active listener, there will be one or the other area that you can take up as a suggestion for improvement. Because I feel no matter how good a speaker is, there are areas for improvement. Now, sometimes you see, even if it is not the obvious would be to talk about the vocal variety, to talk about the gestures, to talk about the stage management. All this would be the obvious. But there could be something that is not that obvious, in the sense whether the message came out in an artificial manner, whether the speech seemed to be too tailor-made for the topic, whether the speech lacked a little bit of what could be called, as I said, the vitals, whether the speaker was able to provide the audience with that authentic touch. There will be one or the other finer aspects of a speech that you could come up with. That is point number one. Point number two, sometimes because we cannot think of anything that is good enough to say, we talk about points which we have already praised in the first manner, and then we say, yes, your body language was good, but you could improve upon your facial expressions. Now that would be self-contradictory. So just for the sake of giving a suggestion, please don't contradict what you have said in the earlier part of your evaluation, simply because you know that there you have that particular area for recommendations. Sometimes you can be humorous and you can say that I consider you being a little cruel towards evaluators by making your speech so perfect, not allowing us to give you recommendations. So probably you must also be empathetic towards your evaluators in ensuring that you don't come up with a speech that comes under the category of near perfection. Things like that. You can try out one or two ideas which would be humorous. The second one is about quotes. Now, about quotes, I think I've already given you my answer. Anything that you employ in moderate measures should be fine. Now, even when it comes to essay writing, we tell them, yes, you can use quotes, but not too many of them. I remember in one of the contests where the speaker had too many quotes, the evaluator rightly pointed out and said that if you have so many quotes by so many learned people, it is as though you only have to say what others have said and you have nothing to say on your own. So it is a pertinent point that you cannot have too many quotes, but one or two quotes in your evaluation and in your speech would be welcome. Moderation, the key word in anything that you employ by way of a technique, the key word is moderation. Don't overdo anything. That is point number one. And point number two is don't use cliched quotes. Use something that would stand out as an original quote, which the majority wouldn't have come across earlier.
Yes.
And you can unmute yourself and ask the question so that the rest of the audience has the pleasure of looking at the ones who have participated. So it's not necessary to write on the chat box itself, but you can always unmute yourself and raise the question.
Yeah, our next question is by Toastmaster Murli Krishnadas. He asks, can you elaborate on the transition from
Yes.
positive statements to suggestions for improvement?
Yes. Now, Muralidhar, is it Muralidhar or Murali Krishna?
Murali Krishna Das.
Murali Krishna Das, yes, I saw his messages on the chat box earlier. Murali Krishna Das, now what you are going to say by way of suggestions depends on the speech. I'm not talking about that part at all. I'm only talking about how do you manage that transition. Now, I have put that picture of the relay, the race, because when you move from one position to another position, you have to show that change, first of all, conclusively, convincingly, that you have finished with one part of your evaluation and you are moving on to the next part of your evaluation. Now, one of the words of caution that I have there is that don't make it too mechanical, cliched by saying the usual things, as I've already said. Now let me tell you how to take your speech to the next level, or by saying that let me now give you recommendations. That would be too straightforward and too bland. So my focus this evening was on not on what you would say by way of suggestions, but how you would achieve that transition from one to the other. That is why I said, think of a few original ways of achieving this transition. And if you cannot think of original ways of achieving this transition, I've already given you a few examples and I request you to work on them. If you can't think of original ways, that's why I also gave some things that would fall under the category of cliche, but how you can change it a little bit and give an original touch. So my focus was only on that and not exactly what you would say by way of suggestions. That would definitely depend on the speech.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a Toastmaster Gayatri Panda. When the speaker is much more experienced than me and I'm a first-time evaluator, what points do I need to consider?
Okay, one of the commonly made points is about that halo effect, which I didn't bring in because I thought all of you would know about that halo effect that we suffer from. As Gayatri said, you have the feeling that the speaker is experienced and how am I going to give that speaker suggestions for improvement? Do I have the right to do that? Gayatri, I must say that just as we say in Toastmasters, don't say professor, don't say doctor. I think the idea of seniority does not exist at all. So as I said, give yourself the chance to listen to a speaker with a completely open mind. That is why I use the analogy of tabula rasa, the empty slate. Just listen to a speaker. And if you feel that the speaker, in your opinion, you might be subjective, but in that slot of 3 minutes, you are welcome to be subjective. As far as you're not cutting and incisive and insulting, you're welcome to be subjective. So just listen to the speaker with an open mind and forget all the other the badges or the frills the speaker would have, because a speaker is a demo speaker for you, or in the club, a speaker is a speaker trying out different modules of pathways. So definitely, and sometimes senior speakers need evaluations from juniors, because you see, take for example, I'm definitely a senior speaker going by my age and by my experience in Toastmasters, but then the perspective of new Toastmasters would be so different from my perspective, and it would be a sheer joy to get evaluation from a new Toastmaster, because that gives me the scope for growth. That is why I said the growth mindset is to say, not yet. I have not yet achieved my best. So your growth mindset will make you look at possibilities of improvement. So just because a person is a senior person, you should not deny that senior member the privilege, the chance of being evaluated in a balanced manner without that halo effect. So I would say you are welcome to evaluate seniors. And if a senior speaker takes offense, even when you have been objective, showing your scientific temper, then that's the problem of that senior member. Forget that senior member's angst. You are not responsible for that.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. From Toastmaster Rudra Kumar, reverting to the power of three, can you please tell us 3 things which would make an evaluation a perfect evaluation?
Okay. Rudra Kumar, first of all, thank you for your faith in me. I saw your messages at the beginning of the session. I was not able to respond, but anyway, Vanita took up the cudgels for me and she responded in my place, and she gave me credit to say that I could take sessions on anything, but Arjun would disagree because I declined his offer of taking a session on pathways. But anyway, coming back to Rudra Kumar, I think I've already answered this question. The key areas of any evaluation would be, as I've already told you, the primacy effect, which would take note of the positives that you're able to gather, the recency effect, the constructive criticism that you are able to give, and this constructive criticism will also take into consideration the smooth transition that goes hand in hand. And finally, I said your conclusion. It shouldn't be like beginning with a lot of force and then, going down in a whimper. So your conclusion should be effective. And again, I said, when we say summation, it's not that you want to say all in all a good speech. You would want to say that a speech had, probably you would say the speech had impact in all 3 areas of public speaking. It had vocal, verbal, and visual variety, and was a joy to listen to. So that's the kind of summation that you would give without repeating what you have already said, bringing in new phrases, new sentences. That would be the kind of summation that you could give. So those are definitely the 3 areas of, so you must also ensure that you give yourself enough time for your constructive suggestions and conclusions. So if you are still with the first part of constructive criticism, even when your amber goes up, then you run the risk. What a coincidence that my amber goes up.
Yeah. So there's one more question by Toastmaster Ashwini Ramesh. When the improvements are more than the positive aspects, how do we provide an evaluation?
Yes. Now, Ashwini, as I have said, it might be positive aspects 3 and improvements 9, but please be empathetic. Please be kind. This I say very strongly because the last online evaluation contest that I attended, I won't say where, when, but the online contest that I attended, with almost every evaluator, I saw that the first part of constructive criticism was dealt with in a customary manner. I have to tell you something that is good, so I'm telling you something that is good. But I'm, raring to give you all suggestions for improvement. That was the kind of tone taken by quite a few evaluators, which surprised me, because even if you have a long list of suggestions for improvement, as I said, put down everything, but then prioritize and don't choose. Now, if you have 3 points as constructive criticism, don't give more than 4 as your suggestions for improvement, because that is not going to be a balanced evaluation. Even if the speaker has been not a very, effective speaker with many flaws, let's understand that with one evaluation, a speaker is not going to have a miraculous change and will not turn out to be a great speaker. So your evaluation is not, the question of life and death for that speaker. So it's not necessary to put out everything that you want to say for his or her improvement. Make it balanced. Don't give too many suggestions for improvement.
Yes, ma'am. I think we still have some more time for Red. So if I can ask a question, is it okay for an evaluator to outshine the speaker when we use a lot of analogies and metaphors and
Susan, it has happened any number of times. Okay, the red has come. Susan, I think we time ourselves perfectly. You refer to red came up. I refer to amber came up. Bhavani seems to be very, very efficient with the flags. Susan, it happens, and it is unavoidable. And I don't think an evaluator should even think about it. If a speaker has been a mediocre speaker and if you are evaluating him, I don't think you should suffer from pangs of guilt. Am I going to outshine the speaker? That's not your concern at all. You do your work of evaluation to the best of your ability. And if you outshine, it's to your credit. I don't think we should ever worry about outshining the speaker. We are not here for social service to say that, oh, the speaker was so bad, so I'm going to make my evaluation also mediocre. No, you have to give your best shot, no matter how the speaker has been.
So thank you, DTM Malini, for your precise answers. And thanks a lot for your wonderful session.